So today we will start with the tripartite struggle, okay, which emerged after the Bose-Gupta period or Harsha period in North India. Now Harshavardhana controlled a large part of central India. We saw that Harshavardhana controlled a large part of central India, but there were some kingdoms in the west, some kingdoms in the east, some kingdoms that came after Harshavardhana, a little lower than Harshavardhana, the Rashtrakutas, okay. The Palas would be in the east, Bengal side, and the Gurjara Pratiharas in the west, Gujarat side, and Rashtrakutas. Not everything is sequential in the sense that even during the time of Harshavardhana, these kingdoms existed, okay, existed towards the sides. And if you look at the Palas and Harshavardhana dynasty, we look at the Palas were stationed in Bengal and Bihar. And we took a look at the ruler of Bengal before the Palas. It was Gota. It was the Gota king. Bengal region was known as Gota. The Gota dynasty's ruler was Shashanka. And Harshavardhana initially struggled against Shashanka. Okay? He wasn't able to conquer the Gota dynasty, right? He wasn't able to conquer the Gota dynasty towards the east, but he kept a check on the Gota dynasty. And right after the Gota dynasty fell, there was this vacuum, okay? But almost every part of the country followed this feudalism. And in the Pala dynasty, before the rise of the Palas, all the feudal lords who were called Samandas, okay, they decided that after the death of Gopala, after the death of Shashanka of Gopala dynasty, there was political instability. There was no one single ruler. So all of them combined, all the feudal lords combined in just one king, and that king was named as Gopala. And this gave rise to the Pala dynasty. Okay, Gopala was the first king of the Pala dynasty. So you can see the situation, right, of feudalism. There was no one single ruler after the death of Shashanka who was powerful enough to fight against Harshavardhana. Even Harshavardhana couldn't defeat Shashanka. He didn't lose against Shashanka, but he couldn't defeat Shashanka. Okay, so after the death of Shashanka came the Palas, and we also have the Gurjara Pratiharas, whose origin we have no idea about. But as you can see by the name itself, Gurjara, they were stationed in parts of Gujarat and Rajasthan. Okay, the main strongholds were in areas of Rajasthan. And Rashtrakutas, they were initially, the Rashtrakuta chief was a feudal lord, okay, of the Chalukyas of Patami. And we already covered the Chalukyas of Patami. But this is the consequence of feudalism, okay. Under the Chalukyas of Patami, there were different feudal lords, and the Rashtrakuta was also one of the feudal lords, okay, who would collect taxes on behalf of the king of Chalukya. But later on, he became too powerful and he challenged the kingdom of Chalukya. He defeated the Chalukya dynasty and he became the ruler of the central India, Rashtrakutas. Okay, this is the story of Gurjara Pratiharas, the Palas, and the Rashtrakutas in the Deccan. Now, let's take a look at Gurjara Pratiharas. The exact origin, since we're talking about the topic tripartite struggle, I've decided to club all these three together, okay? Even though it's not necessarily exactly northern India. For example, Rashtrakutas is in the central, Pala would be in the east, Gurjara Pratiharas would be in the west of India. But I've clubbed it all together in North India because it was all for the control of Kannauj, which was in North India, okay? And a lot of history surrounding these three kingdoms happened in Kannauj, and a lot of inscriptions and writings from Kannauj talk about all these kings battling against each other for the control of the city. And each kingdom took turns controlling the city, but none of them could take control of the city permanently. And before they could take control over the city came the Muslims, right? And so we will start with the medieval age after this, okay? But we will also study some post-Pala period, such as the Senas of Bengal, Okay, we will have a very brief discussion on the Senas of Bengal right after this. After the tribal struggle, there will be some few kingdoms that we will talk about, and after that we will move to medieval India. Okay, all of them were fighting against each other, but came the Muslims, conquered everybody. Okay, and for the next 400, 500 years, they continued to rule until again the Britishers came and then overthrew everyone, established the control. So that's the story of India in a nutshell. Okay. Now, all these Hindu kingdoms and the Buddhist kingdoms that would fight against each other, and then in the medieval period, the Muslims would come, the Muslims would conquer everyone, and in the modern period, the Christians would come and defeat all the Muslims, would establish the rule until 1947 independence. Okay, so we are nearing the end of, let's say, ancient India, and we will move to medieval India after the few topics that we will be discussing today. Now, talking about Gurjara Pratiharas, one of the three kingdoms in the tripartite struggle for Kannauj. Remember, all these three kingdoms struggled for the control of Kannauj. Why? Kannauj was a very important center that was established at the time of Harshavardhana as well as the Gupta period. Anyone who controlled Kannauj controlled North India symbolically, okay? Symbolically, because Kannauj was a place where Kannauj was in a very strategic location, the Ganga Yamuna Top, okay? It was situated at a place where different rivers flowed and they would collect taxes and revenue, okay? And it was the place through which different cities could be connected. There were very good land routes as well as sea routes. For trade and commerce, it was excellent. For warfare, it was excellent. It was situated in a very strategic location, okay? It was a well-protected city, the city of Kannauj. So, of these three cities, the first is the Gurjara Pratiharas. The exact origin of the Gurjara Pratiharas is not clearly known. Some scholars they connect them with the Gurjaras, a powerful clan or people of the northwest region of India. Okay, but others believe that they were originally feudatories of earlier powers, but gradually became independent. So no one knows about the origin of the Gurjara Pratiharas. It is not clearly known. So we have to go by NCERT, right? What NCERT says is not clearly known. So by the 8th century EC, however, they emerged as an important political power. Okay, that's the origin of the Gurjara Pratiharas according to NCERT. Okay, now if you look at the kings, Nagabhata I was the founder of the dynasty. He established his power in Rajasthan and the regions around Rajasthan. That's Gurjara Pratiharas. He laid the foundation of a strong state which was later expanded by his successors. He is well known for resisting the Arab invasion. Now, if we talk about the Arab invasion, okay, let's take a look at the resistance to Arab invasion. In the early 8th century, we're talking about Nagabhata I, the first ruler of Gurjara Pratiharas, okay? In the early 8th century, the Arab armies under Junaid invaded Sindh and advanced towards Rajasthan. So, you know where Sindh is located, right? Sindh is located somewhere around here. Okay, Sindh, the area of Sindh, and Nagabhata I successfully repelled these invasions and saved North India from further Arab advance. This victory marked the beginning of the Pratiharas' reputation as the defenders of India from the west. So the Arab armies under Junaid controlled the Sindh area, okay, and they came to India, okay, in the northwest, and Rajasthan at the time was very large and it was controlled by the Gurjara Pratiharas. Nagabhata I fiercely fought against the Arab armies under Junaid and defeated the Arab army. Now, who is Junaid? He was the governor of Sindh, okay? He was appointed by the Caliph, and the Caliph his main capital was in the modern day Syria, Damascus, okay? Damascus in Syria would be his main. So Muslim country in time Muslim kind of rulers that were very, very powerful during the medieval period. Almost it had the Caliph at the time controlled almost the entire world. It controlled Portugal, Spain entirely. The Caliph, Utula Caliph, Our Central Asia, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, sub control Korea with the Caliph, and Turkey, Syria, Lebanon, sub control Korea, and then the modern day Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, United Arab Emirates, almost all the Islamic parts of the present world that we know now today was controlled by one single ruler, the Caliph. So itu Caliph to be important as they. And after Utu Bishide, we have the Delhi Sultanate, we have the Mughals, right? Utu Mughal was known as the Caliph of the Indians. So Utu Mughal, once the Mughal fell to the hands of the British, there was this one very important revolt, okay, the Khilafat movement, 1928. Just a small interesting fact, what happened in World War I was that Turkey sided with the Germans, okay? And the Germans lost the war in the First World War, right? They also lost the war in the second, but first Turkey though, they lost the war. And then the Allied powers of, like, let's say America, the Great Britain, at the time the Great Britain was very powerful, they decided to remove the Caliph of Turkey. So since they had no ruler in India, the Turkey Caliph was known as the overall Caliph of the entire world. And so the Khilafat movement of 1928, which Mahatma Gandhi supported as well, it was to restore the position of the Caliph, not to remove him. Even Indians fought for it. The Muslims can loyalty iman takazde happening in Turkey, but they are still very loyal, and it created a nationwide movement in India. So in that similar sense, at the time the Caliph, he was very powerful. He would appoint governors in different parts of the world, and Junaid was also one of the governors. After conquering Sindh, Junaid was made the Caliph, was made the governor of Sindh. Okay, and after he conquered areas of Sindh, he went on to try to annex the regions around Rajasthan, which, as you can see, Ajmer, Jodhpur, Bhinmal. Bhinmal was the initial capital of the Gurjara Pratiharas. Okay, and later on Nagabata I would make Ujjain his capital, and later on it would become Kannauj when they took control of Kannauj. Sometimes they would be in control of Kannauj, sometimes the Rashtrakutas, sometimes the Palas. Okay, so temple Kannauj to uptown thakise. Now utu time they attack Puradam de Junaid was defeated by Nagabata I, which is why the Gurjara Pratiharas are known as defenders of India. Okay, this is a very important victory, which you might be asked in the examination. Okay, so the early region of the control was Rajasthan. Okay, early region of the control was Rajasthan. Usain, Rajasthan was a very early Pratihara region. Okay, now eventually their early expansion and base, the early seat of the Pratiharas was Rajasthan, but gradually they expanded the control over Ajmer, Jodhpur, Bhinmal. Okay, and by the time of Nagabata I, all these were already conquered. Okay, and there's a from Bhinmal it went up to Ujjain. Ujjain is somewhere here. Ujjain was made the capital under the rule of Nagabata I, and eventually under the reign of Nagabata II, Kannauj would become the capital. Why? Because Nagabata II would take control of Kannauj and make it the capital. Okay, so that's the history of the Gurjara Pratiharas in a nutshell. Now, important for NPSC or UPSC, the founder Nagabata I, their great achievement is they defeated the Arabs under Junaid, and the core region is Rajasthan, and the later aim of the dynasty would be the control of Kannauj. Okay, it would be the same for the Palas, it would be the same for the Rashtrakutas. All these three kingdoms would try to control Kannauj. Once we're done with Gurjara Pratiharas, we will move to Palas, then we will move to Rashtrakutas, and after that we'll have a few slides discussing about the tripartite struggle, which kingdom defeated which kingdom and which kingdom ruled Kannauj in which period. All these things about Kannauj. Okay. Now next we will move on to slide 2. In slide 2, as you can see, these were the descendants of Nagabata I, Vatsaraja. Okay. The important point about Vatsaraja is he defeated the Pala ruler Dharmapala in the battle for Kanauj. Okay, this is also one of the phase of the tripartite struggle in which Vatsa Raja defeated the Pala ruler Dharmapala, and Nagabata too. He was the most. Now all the kings are not mentioned here, only the important ones. Okay, there are many kings, but I picked out the most important ones. Nagabata too was the most powerful ruler after Vatsa Raja. He captured Kanauj and made it his capital. Right, I've mentioned in the beginning that it was Nagabata too who went all the way from this area to this area and made Kanauj the capital. Okay, Mihira Poja. Again, Mihira Poja was the greatest ruler of their dynasty. Okay, his empire extended from Multan in the west to Bengal in the east, and from Himalayas to Narmada. Himalayas in the north to Narmada in the south. So that was how large Mihira Bhoja's kingdom was. Okay, at one point of time, they controlled the entirety of north and central India, as you can see, with Narmada being the boundary line. Funny enough, Narmada River is always the boundary line. We saw the Shatavahanas, okay, Harshavardhana, he could not go beyond the Narmada River. Pulakeshin too, remember the Chalukya ruler who defeated Harshavardhana? Okay, so after Harshavardhana lost the war, Narmada River was the boundary line. Okay, it's a very interesting geographical landscape of India. And Mahindra Pala, last important king, and after him the power of the dynasty declined. Nothing much to learn. Okay, here. So Kanauj became the political and cultural center of the empire, but only when they had control of Kanauj, not every single time. Like I said, all the three kingdoms took turns to control Kanauj. Okay. Now the tripartite struggle lasted for a very long time. That all the three countries respected each other. They would wage war. They would decide when to wage war, and after the war is waged, they would respect each other enough not to disturb each other. So ta nijo recover grow. Itu bisa war kilo pacha ni sana. Aro rest grow de acha acha. Aro rest grow. Aro chalo kilo. Inya tapla thakis. They had a very big mutual respect for one another. Okay. Now we take a look at the administration. Now the administration had a centralized monarchy with a decentralized administration. The territories were divided into Pugdis, okay, province, and then Vishaya district. Okay, and one very interesting fact about the Gurjara Pratiharas is that the villages will be divided into groups of 12 and 84. Okay, that's also another very interesting fact. And local administration had considerable autonomy. Village elders, Maharatas, known as Maharatas, they managed local affairs. The Gramapati was the head of the village associated with administration. Okay, and there was no large centralized bureaucracy. The administration had a strong Samanda element. Now the Samandas would serve as the ruler of the provinces, and sometimes they would even head the districts, sometimes they would even head the villages. Okay, so feudal lords, feudal chiefs, depending on the size, they were made governors of the provinces. They would be made head of the districts. They would be made head of the villages. So we had feudalism. Feudalism was very common during the time. And if you look at the military strength of the Gurjara Pratiharas, they had a very powerful army, especially a very strong cavalry. Okay, cavalry means soldiers on horseback. Nagabata too repelled the armed forces, which we have learned, and the Gurjara Pratihara military strength was praised by Arab chronicler Suleiman. Okay, Suleiman was an Arab traveler who came to the court of Mihira Bhoja, one of the kings that we studied just now. Okay, he came to the court of Mihira Bhoja and he wrote about the Gurjara Pratihara dynasty. Another very important traveler, Suleiman. Okay, so he wrote an account of the Indian subcontinent, the culture of the Gurjara Pratiharas, and so forth. Okay, now feudatory Samandas, they supplied troops and paid tribute to the king. Now what did I say about the Samandas? These are feudal lords. Okay, the Samandas are feudal lords, and The temple at Ocean, Rajasthan is another very important Gurjara Pratihara architecture. Okay, and the Gurjara Pratiharas were essentially Hindus. Okay, the Palas would be Buddhists, the Senas would be Hindus. Okay, you will learn about all this later on as well. The Gurjara Pratis were essentially Hindus. Okay, Jain and Hindu traditions flourished during their rule. However, a lot of the kings followed the Brahmanical tradition. Okay, so Gurjara Pratiharas were essentially Hindus. Now, you look at, we shall move to the palace. Okay. Now we shall take a look at the palace. If you take a look at the palace, like I mentioned in the beginning, after the decline of the Guptas, Eastern India witnessed political instability. After the decline of the Guptas, okay, the eastern part of India, if you first wait, let me explain that. Yeah. After the Guptas, the eastern part of India experienced political instability. Right? What very important point? Try to connect it. After the post-Gupta period came Harshavardhana. But why is Harshavardhana not mentioned in the history of the Palas? Because I've already mentioned that Harshavardhana could not defeat the region where the Palas controlled, the Kota dynasty, where Shashanka was, right? So Harshavardhana to thagise. But for the Palas, all they know is after the post-Gupta period, it was controlled by Shashanka. From Shashanka, it did not go to Harshavardhana. It directly went to the Palas, okay? Post-Gupta period, after the decline of the Gupta Empire, Shashanka stayed for some time, and Shashanka passed away. Utu pichide, tahanbi munduk na, ait moangi kun rule gruwa. Nijor samandas kan dan, nijor rule gruwa. They are creating their own rules and regulations, and there was no uniformity in trade and commerce. There were a lot of problems. There was no military uniformity, so in the event that a war was waged against them by a very powerful territory, how would they muster up the entire Samandas, gather together under one army? Because they have no leader. That was the situation after the Gupta period in the area where the Pala dynasty would eventually rise. Okay, so the Pala that we're talking about was stationed in Bengal, most part of Bengal. Okay, now after the death of Shashanka and the post-Gupta period, saw political instability in that Bengal region and parts of Bihar. Okay, the powers of the local chiefs increased, the Samantas increased, and there was no strong ruler to protect the region. So this led to disorder, lawlessness, and suffering of the people. Okay, now the people of Bengal and Bihar, along with the leading Samantas, decided to elect a very capable ruler to restore peace and order, and that is why Gopala was chosen. Gopala became the first ruler of the Pala dynasty. Gopala was chosen. He was also one of the Samantas. Okay, Gopala was chosen as the ruler by the people, and he was elected by the Samantas. He was wise, just, and able leader, and under his rule, he restored peace and order. He laid the foundation of the Pala dynasty, and the capital was Patliputra. Okay, anyone who controlled the east, the capital would always be Patliputra, right? Remember Patliputra, a city that was situated at the confluence of the Ganga River, the Gandak, and the Son River, and other rivers, including Kosi as well. Now, the significance of Gopala's election. Okay, the Gopala's election shows the desire of the people for stability and good governance. Okay, and because he was chosen by the people, he wasn't despotic. If a king takes over another kingdom, if a king recruits people into his military, and then if he goes and if he defeats another kingdom and he becomes the overlord of that area, he would have the ego that I am the king and it was me who created this kingdom. But for Gopala, he was chosen by the Samantas, right? So he was humbled, okay, and he was a very good king. which is an example of democracy. The people vote for the right person, and because it's the people's vote, normally a politician is considered to be a good person, which is the opposite in our society, but that's the basic idea of democracy. People's choice, people's mandate, right? So Gopala was people's choice, people's mandate, okay? He was chosen by the Samantas, and he was made to rule the Pala dynasty, which is why the Palas were very stable at that time. They continued to rule very well, okay? So this is it about Gopala, and then came Dharmapala. He was the real architect of the Pala power. He expanded the empire from Bengal into Bihar and parts of Uttar Pradesh. So as you can see, Gopala was chosen, but he controlled parts of Bihar, a small part of Bihar and large parts of Bengal. But it was Dharmapala, okay, who extended the empire of the Pala dynasty from Bengal into Bihar, deep into Bihar and parts of Uttar Pradesh. He also defeated the Gurjara Pratiharas and occupied Kannauj. Now we saw the king of Gurjara Pratiharas once controlling Kannauj, and now we have another Pala dynasty controlling Kannauj, right? So first the Gurjara Pratiharas once controlled, and now we have the Palas controlling Kannauj. We will also have the Rashtrakutas controlling Kannauj, okay? Each of them will control Kannauj one by one, turn by turn. Now he installed Chakrayuta, a Pala vassal, on the throne of Kannauj to establish Pala suzerainty in North India. Now, what does this mean by, what does this sentence mean? It means that Dharmapala, after conquering Kannauj, had to go back to his place of control, Patliputra and Bihar, Bengal, back chai and tate kunba ke rakhi dise apni control ko rakhi bi ko te goina a Pala vassal, okay, vassal ekta rakhi dise, right? So who is a vassal? A vassal is someone who promises his allegiance to the king, okay? Let's say there's a military commander or a governor or a king, and he bows down in front of one king, says that I pledge my allegiance to you, my lord. I will continue to serve you, and however long I serve is up to your goodwill. That's vassal. He is a vassal, okay? So ekta vassal rakhi dise, a Pala vassal on the throne of Kannauj to establish Pala suzerainty in North India. He also maintained friendly relations with the another very interesting point. Now the Gurjara, the Palas, we're studying about the Palas now. Rashtrakutas and Pratiharas and Palas dan dunjun ekilot fight kure. But just see how tricky Dharmapala was. He maintained friendly relations with the Rashtrakutas against the Pratiharas. So kitiaba do dan dunjun majune be action fight run nai dujon ekilot miliwo action ki pitawo na inigala strategy bi thakiste. So it be ekta strategy ase. Now after Dharmapala came Devapala, okay? It was Devapala who extended the empire to its maximum extent. His empire stretched from Assam. Now Assam included as a little bit of Assam, and east to the Yamuna in the west up to Yamuna. My goodness, how big, how large of a kingdom that is, right? Himalayas in the north and to the Godavari. Not only the Narmada, but Godavari river tak chaisitai. Okay, another increase in the size of the kingdom, right? And he had cordial relations with Sri Lanka, Nichide, Sri Lanka, Nichide as Sri Lanka, and then Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia would be somewhere around here, right? India yadi as Southeast Asia. Java and Sumatra were two islands that were under the control of various kings in Indonesia. Okay, it's in Indonesia. Java and Sumatra is in Indonesia. He had cordial relations with Sri Lanka, with the kingdom in Indonesia. He was a devout Buddhist and a great patron of monasteries. Now, what did I tell about Gurjara Pratiharas? They were essentially Hindus. Now came the Palas. The Palas were essentially Buddhists. Okay, so religion be na alak thage. Now please research these places. Okay, architectural structures. Now let's take a look at the Palas, the administration, culture, and decline of the Palas. Okay, again it's the same as Gurjara Pratiharas, right? In almost the entirety of India during the time, province was known as Pukti, district was known as Vishayas. If you try to connect the terms, okay, of all the kingdoms, you will find a lot of similarities. So try not to study independently. Try to study it in a kind of format that helps you understand, well, this is it. This is a similarity. And you don't have to duplicate your efforts. And if you study all the independent kingdoms independently, you will find it very difficult to memorize all these terms. Vishayas, Kramas, and Purohita priests, Samanda, all these terms is very easy to remember as long as you understand that these terms were uniformly used across India. Okay, and this part of the kingdom and this part of the kingdom, all of them had one common terminologies for the administrative structure of their respective kingdoms, which we see here in the Palas. The Pukti was known as province, Vishaya district. Grama is always going to be village, right? Grama, we've heard about it. Almost all the dynasties that we studied up to date. Okay, it's only in the Mughal period that the terms will change because Islamic traditions can aay, Islamic laws can aay, Islamic terminologies can aay. But large part of ancient India, Vishabhakta almost similar. It's very similar to the Hindi that we know today. Okay, the Grama, na village ko ito ajali tapi Grama, na so Grama village elders Maharatas or Kutumbikas. Okay, you can take a look at it. And then the province was headed by a provincial governor named Uparika. Vishaya, Vishapati, Grama, Gramika. Na, Udupi terms can be related as they. Okay, so now military strength. The Palas had a strong army with cavalry, means soldiers on horsebacks, elephants, and infantry. Okay, now at their height under Deva Pala, I think I've mentioned earlier that Pala influence extended over Bengal, Bihar, parts of Uttar Pradesh, and into Assam, and all the way down to the Godavari River. Okay, initially Narmada River, but olok niche the Godavari River, the Godavari River da Tharmapala la time de jaishe. Okay. Now see, I told you the Palas were great patrons of Buddhism. Okay, and one particular sect of Buddhism, the Mahayana. Mahayana Buddhism is known as the greater vehicle, right? And anything that is not Mahayana was termed as Hinayana. Do you guys remember? Yep, Mahayana Buddhism. And they also believed in Bodhisattvas, right? So this sect of Buddhism greatly flourished during the Pala period. Okay, so they patronized Nalanda Mahavira and established great centers of learning like Vikramshila and Somapura, which you will learn in the next slide. Very interesting slide, the upcoming slide. Okay, so how did the Palas decline again? How did the Palas decline? Rise of feudalism, Samandas. Okay, again Samandas can still exist. So after maybe multiple generations, eventually with the Samandas can nijor form gona jai jishe. Okay, so powerful regional chiefs or Samandas became independent. Same is the case with all the kingdoms that followed this feudalism system. Rashtrakutas, Cholas, Chanderas, and other kingdoms challenged the Pala influence, the tripartite struggle, internal rebellions such as the Gevada uprising in Varendra, which I've made a separate slide for that uprising later on. Okay, and the decline of the Pala power led to the rise of the Senas in the 12th century. Okay, after the decline of the Pala power came the Senas. Okay, Rama Pala was the last important ruler who recovered Varendra and temporarily revived the Pala power, but eventually they declined. Now let's look at the 5 great Buddhist Mahaviharas of eastern India under the Pala Empire. Okay, Nalanda University, Otandapuri, Vikramshila, Somapura, and Chakatala. These are the 5 great Buddhist Mahaviharas. Okay, what is Vihara? Chaitya means prayer hall. Vihara means monasteries. These are the 2 terms that you must never ever forget. Okay, so these were Buddhist monasteries. Okay, these were centers of learning, centers of education. Okay, centers of residence for Buddhist monks. So these 5 Mahaviharas, monasteries, are very important, and you need to memorize each of them for your examination. Okay, 2, 3, 4, and 5 were constructed under the patronage of the Pala dynasty. This is why the Pala dynasty is very popular. Okay, these 4 monasteries were created by the Pala dynasty. Only the first one, Gupta dynasty. Okay, we talked about Hyun who studied in Nalanda University. Okay, even Aryabhata was a student of Nalanda University. Now, it existed during the time of the Gupta dynasty, the Nalanda University. But other than that, the remaining 4, Otandapuri, Vikramshila, Somapura, Jakatala. Okay, these were the 4 universities created during the time of the Pala dynasty, and each king is also mentioned: King Kopala, King Dharmapala, King Dharmapala, King Ramapala. Okay, these were centers of excellence. Almost all is located in now Nalanda, Otandapuri, and Vikramshala to India Victoria ase. And Somapura and Jakatala, Bangladesh la under the Ahijeshde. Now Bengal was West Bengal and East Bengal, right? The East Bengal were dominated by the Muslims. The West Bengal was dominated by Hindus. Okay, so we will see that the Lord Curzon, Lord Curzon, he divided Bengal into 2 in 1905, into West Bengal and East Bengal, and later on it merged in 1911, 1905 to separate Kodishe, 1911 the merged Kodishe, and Uttar in 1947 are separate Kodishe. Bengali Muslims, they fought for their independence. They were a minority. Okay, trade and commerce funny be Bengali Hindus kani lule, sob lule. So Bengali Muslims kan they fought, they won. Okay, so it created the East Bengal was named East Pakistan, right? And West Pakistan is the Pakistan that we know now today, and East Pakistan ina ulaishe. Later on it became Bangladesh or East Bengal. Okay, so that's East Bengal. Uti East Bengal be India la pitore thakisi do Indian subcontinent na. To utu Somapura or Jakatala do East Bengal de ase, which means independence pasa sate utu tuita be Bangladesh la pitore ai jise. Okay, yeah, so yeah, utu Bangladesh la map asale, not India map. Now the Gurjara uprising. Okay, this is the Gurjara uprising, Varendra rebellion. Now causes of the uprising: political instability. Let's take a look at this. A powerful revolt in northern Bengal that shook the foundations of the Pala authority and led to a temporary independence of Varendra. Okay, time period late 11th century. Location Varendra region here. Okay, Varendra region, northern Bengal, and leader Divya or Tipyak, a powerful Gurjara chieftain. Okay, so this chieftain revolted against the Palas. Why? King Mahipala of the Pala dynasty tried to tighten the central taxes. Okay, so he subjugated the people by levying extreme taxes that the people were unable to afford, unable to pay. Okay, so land tax can which caused an upset in the minds of the local samandas, the chieftains, feudal lords, and even the cultivators. Okay, so this created an opportunity to challenge the authority. And at the time, Pala dynasty was quite weak. Okay, it wasn't as strong as the time of Dharmapala, Tevapala, Kopala. The Pala dynasty under King Mahapala II was weak. They revolted against it. Okay, so the rebels that captured Varendra, the northern side of the Bengal, defeated the Pala forces, and King Mahipala was defeated in the battle. Another very important point: King Mahapala was defeated in the battle. Okay, so there's this Pala defeat. The rebels captured Varendra. King Mahipala was killed, and Divya and his successors, including Bhima, ruled Varendra independently for a very short time. very short time garni tang control kodaise. Now Mahipala la brother Ramapala. So pala na. Ramapala gathered regional allies and defeated the final rebel forces, restoring Pala control over Varendra. But by that time, the Pala dynasty became very, very weak. Okay, the uprising revealed the weakness of the central authority. Pala was restored, but its power was permanently weakened. It paved the way for the rise of regional powers, including the Senas. Okay, it gave rise to the it paved the way for the rise of the Senas in Bengal, especially. Okay, so post Pala period, these were the small kingdoms that emerged. Okay, we have the Chandra dynasty. We do not need to study the Chandra dynasty. Just for your general knowledge, exam devi na lagi most probably. Okay. We have the Varman dynasty, Kamboja Pala dynasty, and Utuan. They were small dynasties. Okay, please wait for a second. So after the fall of the Pala dynasty, there were small dynasties that existed during the post-Pala period. And during the post-Pala period, some of the names were Chandra, Varman, Kamboja, Deva dynasty. Okay, but the important dynasty that we need to learn is the Pala dynasty, Sena dynasty. After the fall of the Palas, there were Samandas, feudal lords, and these feudal lords took control of various territories of the Pala dynasty. But the most important one is the Senas. Okay, the Senas would rise, and they would eventually control the rest of the territories that were controlled by the regional Samandas after the fall of the Palas. Palas kan hui jeshe chudu Samandas kan dagyo. Yadipi Senas, they were one of them. Senas kan aro Utuan ki control go eventually. Okay, so that's Sena dynasty. So that's Sena dynasty. They use a lot of power down below for construction, which is why it affects the overall electricity of the building. But worry not. So after that, we will have the Sena dynasty. We will study about the Senas. So let me just give you a brief facts about the Senas. Okay, now we are talking about Bengal. We're talking about Bihar, but the Senas, their origin is Karnataka. Okay, their origin is Karnataka, and you have read in the past about the Cholas and the Chalukyas. The Cholas and the Chalukyas, they were in South India, right? South India, Cholas or Chalukyas, they would go on and they would try to attack and annex various parts of North India. Okay, and any attack rather than soldiers can jaida. Soldiers can jaigina, they would station themselves in parts of Bengal, right? Sometimes they controlled Kanoj, Ujjain, Utukan, Paliputra, Utuan control production. Utu time the soldiers can China settle Huijala. So they were actually their origin is Karnataka, but these soldiers, while the Cholas and the Chalukyas they went on to attack Bengal, Utu time that these soldiers they settled there. It is settled Huijagina, Utuan la lineage kando Senas kanase. Chala origin to Karnataka de. Easy to know, right? So iniga hoigina, after the fall of the Palas, the Senas came, and then the Senas they took control over the region, the vacuum that was created by the Palas. Okay. Does anyone want water? Water? Okay, I'll bring it. You guys can take this 1 minute break to cool off your minds. The Senas are very interesting. Okay, it's a very interesting subject of study. The Senas. So we are done with the post-Pala period. The Chandra, Varman, Kamboja, Deva dynasty, all its kingdoms Thagishe. But the Senas eventually rose as the most dominant power in Bengal. Okay. If anybody wants water, you guys can have it. Yeah, here's yours. Thank you. No. So this is the post-Pala period, and it is just given for your information. Okay, these dynasties you will likely not need it, but I've just mentioned it. And what's important is the Sena dynasty that came after the Palas. Okay, as I mentioned, their origin is Karnataka or Karnataka region. Samanta Sena is regarded as the founder of the Sena line. Okay, and Hemanta Sena established an independent Sena principality in Brata, which you will learn about later. And Vijaya Sena transformed the Sena principality into a powerful kingdom and expanded Sena authority in Bengal. Okay, the Senas gradually displaced the declining Pala power in Bengal. Now, if you take a look at Samanta Sena, he is regarded only as the founder, and that's it. There's nothing much that we know about Samanta Sena. We know a lot of sources talks about Vijaya Sena, Palala Sena, and Lakshmana Sena. Okay, so just know Samanta Sena as the founder, and we will directly switch to Vijaya Sena. Okay, now he consolidated Sena power in Bengal. He expanded his kingdom over large parts of Bengal. He defeated the declining Pala power. It was Vijaya Sena who crushed the Pala power and laid the foundation for Sena supremacy. Even though he wasn't a founder, he was the one who defeated the declining Pala power and founded the supremacy, Sena supremacy. Okay. Now we have the Palala Sena. He maintained and strengthened the kingdom. He is traditionally associated with the system of Kulinism. He is the author of Tana Sagara. Okay, Tana Sagara is a book, and he also began another book that is up to Tasagara, which was completed by Lakshmana Sena, the next king, Lakshmana Sena. Now, let's talk about Kulinism. Okay, Kulinism simply means marriage based on social status. Okay, a woman is not allowed to marry a man who is of a lower social class, but a man is allowed to marry a woman of any class. So if that rule is applied upon the Sena community, just imagine there will be lesser men at the top, more men at the bottom, and more women trying for lesser men. Okay, I mean, manu kumti hui jabo maikian garnido. So girls are only allowed to marry men with a higher social status than them. They are never allowed to marry a man of lower social class. If they do marry, then they will be cast out from the community. Okay, it was a very strict rule set by Palala Sena, and that is called Kulinism. Okay, so this led to hypergamy. We call it hypergamy, marrying someone of higher social class. Okay, the hypergamy was applied to both apply to women, right? And men could marry a woman of any class. So mota karne do its advantages. They can go pick out any woman. But maiki karne do it became difficult. Kile mota higher class pa pawole. Imagine that abni let's say right below the royal class would be the high class elites, right? Imagine you're a woman belonging to an elite family and you can only marry a man with a royal lineage. Now royal lineage the man kiman thakibo, which led to polygamy, which means in order to protect their lineage, in order to protect the prestige of the family, women were married off to men who were already married, who had already multiple wives. So this led to polygamy. So tangor manu khan do royal our elites khan na takhan la de maigi beshi hui jise. This led to polygamy, okay? Because there was hypergamy and you were only meant to marry a man of higher social status. So I don't know why this rule was created, okay? So that's it. Balala Sena is popularly known for starting Kulinism. And Kulinism is a very, very important term, okay? Very, very important term, so memorize that term as well. Now, next we have Lakshmana Sena, the last major ruler of the Sena dynasty. He was a patron of Sanskrit literature and learning. His reign witnessed the Turkish conquest of Nadia. Okay, now this is Nadia, okay, a region in Bengal. So the Turkish conquest of Nadia happened during the time of Lakshmana Sena. Now, if we are talking about this particular conquest of Turkish conquest of Nadia, we're not talking about the Turkish people who conquered India, nothing, okay? It was in Afghanistan la manu ase, a Turkish adventurer named Bakhtiyar Khilji. Not of the Khilji dynasty that we will be studying in the Delhi Sultanate, just Afghanistan laga Kurit Empire guna thakise, tate laga ekta adventurer, a military commander, okay? He was part of the Kurit Empire in Afghanistan, but Afghanistan, but he wanted to, venture out, okay? He was an adventurer again. So once the Delhi Sultanate stationed themselves in Delhi, he went to Delhi Sultanate, gave them gifts, okay? And then gave them gifts because he wanted to explore India, okay? So the Delhi Sultanate was very powerful, right? So he went to Delhi Sultanate, Ram Gurishe na, gifts kan disha, Delhi Sultanate pa tagyo, apni kido matik ta diwo be na Bihar di dishe. So Bihar de chutu matik ta dishe, to tai jagi na Bakhtiyar Khilji to puje she. Tade ba tala adventure la spirit ulai she. Ino hoy gina do palas kan je attack kushe dai tade ba na. So that's Bakhtiyar Khilji, okay, of the Kurit Empire of Afghanistan. Utuase, his reign witnessed the Turkish conquest of Nadia, okay, and he continued the Sena rule in eastern Bengal after the fall of. Now, after Bakhtiyar Khilji, he took over this part, okay. The Lakshmana Sena continued the Sena rule in eastern part of the Bengal. Utu part to luili shido, to utu part te rule kuri thakisha after the fall of Nadia, okay. Now, these are some features which is a little boring, right? I cannot explain to you from a narrative perspective. I can only give you the facts. The Senas maintained a monarchy headed by the king, which is very obvious. They had a king. The first king was Kopala. Samanda Sena. Now, administration was carried out through royal officials, local authorities and subordinate chiefs. Land grants, especially the Brahmanas, which would be Brahmadeyas. Land grants to Jains would be Palichantam. Okay, these are the terms that you need to remember. Copper plate inscriptions are important sources for administration, land grants, and officials. This is the copper plate inscription of the Sena period. Okay, the kingdom was divided into provinces, districts, and villages, as was the case with the kingdoms that we studied before the Senas. Okay, whatever terms you studied in the Palas, it will apply to the Senas. The Puktis, the Vishayas, the Gramas, the Vishapati, okay, the Gramika, all this will apply to the Sena period. So the Senas, again, the Palas were Buddhists, but then the Senas were Hindus. Okay, they were devout patrons of the Brahmanical Hinduism. Shaivism and Vaishnavism received royal patronage. Okay, as you can see, the Gurjara Pratiharas, they were Hindus. The Palas were Buddhists, and now the Senas are Hindus. So you can see the different religion that each king patronized. The Brahmanas were granted land and enjoyed high status. Okay, temples and religious institutions flourished under the Sena period. Okay, now we studied about Kulinism, Palala Sena. Okay, so the system that ranked Brahmanas and Kayastas into Kulina, Shrestha, Satarana, all these terms are not too important as long as you understand the meaning of Kulinism and who introduced Kulinism, Palala Sena. Okay. So Sanskrit was the court language and enjoyed great patronage. Every time there is this, every time a king patronizes Hinduism or the Brahmanical religion, the language that they prefer is Sanskrit. Okay, and every time a certain king patronizes Buddhism, the language that they prefer is Prakrit. Itu be ekta trend ekta follow करे. In the modern era, obviously both the Hindus, the Buddhists, the Jains, they began to, include Sanskrit into the culture. But if you look at the past kingdoms, the Buddhist kingdoms, Prakrit ina hoigina jai. They Prakrit, and then Pali be another important language. But for Hindu, usually Sanskrit, they prefer Sanskrit. The Sena period witnessed the development of the temple architecture and sculpture. Numerous temples, tanks, and religious institutions were built. The Sena period terracotta plaque, okay, West Bengal, is also another important. You can research on these pictures that I give you guys. Okay, go back home, research on these pictures, where it is located, right, and then try to form an image. I've given you guys the image. You guys can go home and research it. Now, the decline. Bakhtiyar Khilji's invasion we have studied earlier. Okay, now Nadia fell to Bakhtiyar Khilji, right? The Sena dynasty did not immediately end after the fall of Nadia. The Sena rulers continued to rule in eastern Bengal. Okay, Lakshmana Sena, he retreated to eastern Bengal after he was defeated by Bakhtiyar Khilji, and Vishwarupa Sena, son of Lakshmana Sena, continued to rule in that part of eastern Bengal. Keshava Sena, who continued the dynasty for a further period in eastern Bengal. Okay, thus the Sena authority survived in parts of eastern Bengal even after the loss of Nadia. So, if you talk about the decline of the Senas, it would be the weakening of central authority, the rise of independent chiefs or samandas, regional fragmentation, loss of political unity, expansion of Turkish power into Bengal, which is Bakhtiyar Khilji, capture of Nadia by Bakhtiyar Khilji. Okay, these are the reasons that you can use for the fall of the Sena kingdom. Okay, now these are the historical importance. The Senas replaced the Palas as a dominant power in Bengal. Very important point. The Senas strengthened Brahmanical Hindu traditions in Bengal, because before the Senas, the Palas, they patronized Buddhism, right? And then the Senas, they patronized the Sanskrit literature, learning and arts. Okay, the Senas are associated with great literary figures like Jayadeva. Now, after the Senas, we will learn about the Rashtrakutas. Okay, we will learn about